Okay, spent the last hour or so cleaning up the wiring harness. So I took that, rewrapped it, and then doubled it around and just zip tied it together there, and I'll tie it up to one of those holes here at some point in time. That'll take care of that, and then we're back here, and I don't know if you noticed in the previous videos how much of a mess this area was back here, but cleaned it up, cut some length out of some of the wires, fixed some of the places where they were broken, and now we got it all taped back up, ready to go. So that'll be just a little nice touch there to fit in with the new bed as we go together. Guys and gals, we got her all back together except for the drive shaft. So that'll be our next installation here. Let me show you a couple things we've done. Got those emergency brake cables hooked back in. Remember, we just had to remove those extenders and the little clips that went with them. That went good. Had to add a second nut in there to lock that down. You should always do that. Got our new brake line in. You see it down there. And comes along through the frame rail here and up and around and fastens in there. And then we've got the wires tied up to it in several spots here so that they stay where they're supposed to be. And that's got us all done. We had it had these little clips that fit into a hole in the frame, so we drilled some new holes and put a couple of those clips in to hold the brake line in place. And they are really pretty sturdy and doing a nice job, so that should be good. But I think we've got everything where we want it here. Now I just got to cut the drive shaft down and put it in. So that's our next goal. We're allowing the air to bleed out of the brake line there, and we'll probably have to go pump on the pedal a little bit to get it done, get a helper out here, but that's it. We're that close. So we'll start in now working on the drive shaft. I'll get that laid out and show you what we're going to do with it. It's time to cut down the drive shaft. So knowing this is normally a job that's done by a shop so that they can maintain the precision of it, we need to be doing something to be as precise as we can here. I've done this several times and it seems to work okay. Yeah, they're probably not perfectly balanced, but I haven't noticed any problems with it. So what I've done on our drive shaft, since we took 16.5 inches out of the front section of the frame, that's what I'm going to do here. So I have myself a mark there, which you can't see probably. I'll zoom in here. There's a penciled arrow there. Then I came 16.5 inches down from there. Got another mark on the drive shaft. And then you go, okay, well, how do I get a straight line around there? Well, you need something solid and stiff. So this is a piece, this is an old manila folder. And I used a straight edge to cut the tab off of it so I would have one edge that was perfectly straight. And then you wrap it around here so that the ends of it line up. This is the important thing right here. You want this edge of the paper to line up with the other edge of the paper coming in from over here. When you got that, you know you have a perfect circle around there. So I've done that. I had it, I got it taped in place there. So I took it up here, and you can barely see that I've got a line scratched in it right there. But I've done that with this awl, or I don't know, some people call it a scribe, but anyway, it's got a point on it, and it's a little harder steel than most. So I've scratched the line around it there. Then I am going to put a sleeve inside of the cut to do two things, to strengthen it and to help stiffen it. And so this piece right here is going to be my sleeve. So over here I've got about 3 inches down here to where I'm going to run into the end of this forging down here. It comes to about here. So I got 3 inches there. And so I just added another 3 inches to it, measured from this line over 6 inches, set my paper again, and I've got another mark scribed there. Now I'm going to slide the paper on down here to my 16.5 inch mark and make that final scribe line there. And then, just like I did on the frame of the truck, I am going to use my angle grinder with a cutoff wheel on it to do this, because it's like I said before, I'm finding that I can be very, very accurate with that thing, and that's something that I really want here. You have lots of options. Once you have your line scribed, you could cut this with a sawzall as long as you stay on this side of the line and then grind it back to your line. That's another option. If you have a giant pipe cutter, I've seen guys do it with that. The most common way is a big cutoff saw, a metal cutoff saw that's got a giant cutoff wheel on it. And if you get that set in there so it's perfectly square, then you can make 2 good cuts on it there, and you'll be all set with that. So there's 2 or 3 different ways to do it. I just like the grinder. I've just had such good experience with it that that's what I'm going to use when I do this. So when we come back, I will have moved over here and marked my other line. I will, at the next video, I'll show you, I'll have this cut off, I'll have this piece cut out, and I'll have it cut back here at my other line. So I'll come back at that point and then show you what I'm going to do from there. So here's what we've got with everything marked and cut apart. Got the main section of my drive shaft still there, cut off right there where I want it. This chunk right here is the other end of the keeper part, so we will end up putting it on here like that. This is going to be my sleeve, and I'll show you how I'm going to make that fit inside here in just a minute. And then that piece over there is going to be my waist, what gets thrown away. So what I will do is I'll go in and take a round file and I'll clean all these burrs off of the inside of all the pieces that I'm keeping to start with. That'll be my first prep thing. Then let's see if I can find it here. Inside of the tubing of these things, there it is. There is always, get a better light, there's always a seam running the length of the tubing there. And that seam is raised just a touch, so it makes the metal just a hair thicker where they welded it together there. So what I'm going to do, so first of all, if I put a sleeve inside of this one, you can barely see the seam right there. That seam is going to hold it to where it's not concentric. It'll hold it out of alignment. And in order to get this piece to fit in there, what I'm going to do is where my seam is, I am going to run a mark lengthways down this tube, and I'm going to cut that with my cutoff wheel so that it removes that seam. And I probably will have to maybe make this about 1/4 of an inch wide of a cut there. So I'll have to make a second cut. And then I can take some hose clamps and squeeze them together until this thing will slide inside of the main drive shaft that I'm keeping there. And that will do a couple things. Because it still has some spring to it, it will expand out against the sides and line it up perfectly. And it will allow me to keep that alignment in the right spot. And then it will also give me another surface to weld to, so that I'm not just welding right here at the joint on the outside of 2 pieces of tubing. I'll have myself maybe a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch gap in there, and I'll be welding here and down into that gap and up onto the other piece of tubing. So I think that's going to make it significantly stronger. But by doing those things, being careful with my welds, probably grinding them down so that they smooth out good, then I should be able to retain the balance of what I'm doing here, as long as I don't cut too much out of this piece for that slot, so that we lose metal there and it causes that to be a light spot on the flip over part of it. And we might do that, but that's the objective, is to try not to. So there you have my 3 pieces. I will, once I get this sleeve cut, I will show you what I'm talking about so that you can see how it goes together, and then we'll go from there. Alright, here we're prepped, and you can see what I've done on this deal. I had to cut about, it was nearly 3/8 of an inch out of the length of this pipe to get it to shrink down where it would fit inside. But now you can see when we take those clamps off, it expands out and completely fills up that area there. I've got a pencil mark here on the outside that corresponds to that seam we were talking about on the inside of the tubing, and I have that on both pieces of tubing, so I can align those back up and we will know that we're in exactly the right spot as far as having everything in phase with each other. So your U-joint here and your U-joint there, or your yoke down there and here, both need to be sitting in exactly the same plane as you put this thing back together. And so that's what we're going to be gunning for as we do it. I'm going to slip this in there now and get it lined up and push the thing closer together, and then I will show you the next step that I'm going to be working on as we do that. Alright, so I've got them put together there. Got my hose clamp shrinker off of there and shoved them in to where I've got, oh, there's not quite 1/8 of an inch of gap there, and that's what I want so I can get down in there and weld to that sleeve really good. So I've got that done. That's going to do most of the alignment work on it here. I've got my 2 pencil marks lined up. I had a little bit of ability to twist them there, so I may tweak that a little more. It looks like it's not quite where I want it. But anyway, I'll get those perfectly lined up, and then I'm going to clamp this thing into the angle iron to help hold it straight, and I will show you that here right before I weld it. But we're actually getting quite close to being ready to weld the thing back together. Okay, now we've got our drive shaft clamped into that piece of angle iron there. I'm going to be able to see it really well. Maybe from over here you get a better picture of it. But that is going to be what holds it straight, perfectly straight, while we get some tack welds on it. And that's going to be the critical thing. One little note here, drive shaft tubing is really thin, so when you're tightening your C-clamps down, just snug them up good. Don't put enough pressure on it to distort the tubing in there, or you'll make things way worse than they were. So these are snugged up pretty good, but they're not tightened so that they distort the tubing. So with that all in place, I am ready to put some tack welds on this thing, and we'll get her tacked together and pull that angle iron back off of there and show you where we're at, and then we'll be ready to weld. We got her. She's all welded up and the weld ground off and cleaned up, so it looks nice. And I think we're going to be plenty strong because we got that sleeve in there, so we should be good. Now she's ready to go back in. I'll probably spray a little primer on that to keep it from rusting. And I'll clean the grease off the U-joints and the U-bolts and things like that. But we're ready to bolt this baby back in, and that's the last piece to get the crazy dead bump side back on the road and drivable. After that, we got to get our trailer over here and pull that other bed off, and then we should be able to just drop it right on here, and voila, we will have a short bed pickup. Exciting. Alright, I'll give you one last shot when I get her put in, and that'll be the end of it. Alrighty then, it's back to roadworthy. We've got the thing all back together except for putting the bed on. So we're all good. There we go. Got a drive line in and should be functional. I can probably drive it around now if I wanted to, but I won't. I'm going to wait and go grab that other bed and get it put on here, and that'll be what the next series of videos is about. Just putting the bed back on it. So there you go. I guess one little thing I could mention here, this cab, you've probably noticed in several of the videos, has some pretty significant rust in the corners of it. If I was doing a more detailed restoration, I'd probably replace that. And in fact, if I was going to keep it myself, I'd probably replace it, but my intent is to sell this truck once I'm done with it anyway, so that I can finance some of my other Crazy Dad projects. So anyway, just thought I'd point that out to you. Replacing cab corners it's a little bit involved. It's not horrible, but it's one of those things that's doable if you take your time and use a little bit of patience on it. If you're the kind of person who would be willing to cut your bed in chunks and weld it back together, welding a cab corner in is not any harder than that. So anyway, this truck's in fairly good shape. It's got some little rust places like that, although not as much as some of the others that I've done like this. So anyway, we're ready to slap the bed back on this thing and have ourselves a driver. So we'll be getting around to that here in the next video on the Crazy Dad Bumpside.